Hello, welcome to one more episode of Quantum Tutorials. In this episode, let us understand about the various types of projects which we can create in Visualizer. As we discuss about these various types of projects that we can create in Visualizer, we will look at them from two perspectives. One, how the code is organized in each type of project. Two, how will be the performance of the application when it is running on the end user's device if a particular project type is used for building that app. So without further ado, let us start looking at the free-form type of project. So this is one of the types of projects which you can build using Visualizer. So in a free-form type of project, you will have forms describing the various UI screens which you want to create as part of your front-end application, and modules describing the JS files inside which you will write the functionality which you want to build as part of the front-end application. As you can see here, all the forms and the modules which are the JS files which contain the functionality of your application, all of them are global, which means any form can access any of the functionality which you write in any of the JS modules that you build as part of this project. So this means over a period of time, as you start building more functionality into your project, you will end up creating more forms and more JS modules. So easily over a period of time, the code would get very messy, which means it will not be so organized such that you will not be able to tell which form is making use of which functionality that is present in your n number of JS modules that you have created as part of your project. So over a time, the maintenance of code in such type of project would get very tricky. If you are trying to fix a bug in a particular module, let's say if you are trying to fix a bug in your login module, because there is no clear segregation of which JS files or which forms are taking care of the logging module, you would end up going through the entire code to understand where the login functionality is implemented and to fix the bug in that login flow. And also this might lead to causing unnecessary issues. While you are trying to fix a bug in a particular module, you might end up creating a new bug in a different module, because the code for all the functionalities of the project are scattered across the various JS modules that you create in such type of project. We need to have a better way of organizing the code so that it will be maintainable, and also fixing the bugs or adding new features into the project can be done in a much cleaner fashion. Let's look at how would be the code flow in such type of project. So you would create forms representing the UI screens that you want to have inside your application, and the JS modules implementing the functionality that you want to have inside the application. Any user action on the form would invoke the functions that you are going to implement as part of your JS modules, and from the JS modules you would interact with the services that you have configured inside the fabric layer, and the fabric layer would go and talk to any of the backend systems that you are interacting with. So this is how the control flow would be in a free-form type of project. So clearly in a free-form type of project, we are lacking the code segregation or modularity. Also, from the runtime perspective, when you build the application and launch it on the end user's device, because all the forms and modules in this type of project are global, all those forms and modules would load at the initial app launch time. So imagine the end user is just going through the first two forms inside your application and closing the app. Even then, all the forms and modules that are part of your application would get loaded at the initial app launch time, consuming the memory that is available in the user's device, and this might lead to performance issues. So we should have a better way of loading the forms and loading the JS modules when the app is running in the user's device. So this is about the free-form type of project which you can build using Visualizer. The second type of project that you can build using Visualizer is called a reference architecture type of project. Here is how the code in the reference architecture type of project is organized. Similar to how we have forms inside the free form type of project, in the reference architecture type of project as well, we'll create forms corresponding to the UI screens that you want to build as part of your application. And you will also have modules having the functionality which you want to build as part of your application. Here, the modules can be global, or you can also create modules using require.js, so that you can load a specific JS module only when you want to use that functionality of that JS module, instead of loading all the modules in the initial app launch time. There is one more group that you are seeing here as form controllers. A form controller is a simple JS file which gets created whenever you create a new form inside reference architecture type of project. So every form in a reference architecture type of project would have a corresponding form controller, and the functionality that you want to implement for every user action on a form, you would write the functionality in the corresponding form controller of that particular form. For example, if you have a login form, you will have a login form controller. On the login form, if you are trying to implement the login functionality, remember my username functionality, forgot username functionality, for all these functionalities that you want to implement as part of the login module in the login screen, you will implement the corresponding functions which you want to invoke in the login form controller. So clearly, when compared to a free form type of project, the code inside the reference architecture type of project is much more organized, and each component is having a specific responsibility that it has to perform, because every form is having a corresponding form controller. The functionality of a particular form is implemented in that form controller associated with that form. So the code is much more organized when compared to the free form type of project. And even the modules that you can create as part of this reference architecture type of project, you can create them as a require.js modules, so that you can load them only when you want to use the functionality as part of that module. So for example, at a later point of time, if you are trying to fix a bug in one of the modules that you have implemented, let's say the login functionality, you would go and look at the login screen and the corresponding form controller. So you will understand what is the functionality which you have implemented as part of the login screen, and you can easily fix the bug that you are trying to address. Adding a new feature or a functionality into a reference architecture type of project is also very clean when compared to the free form type of project. And also from the runtime perspective, when you build an application using reference architecture type of project, when it is running on the end user's device, in a reference architecture type of project, all the form controllers and the modules which you create using the require JS structure are loaded only when you do a require on them, which means all of them does not get loaded in the initial app launch time. Only when you navigate to a particular form or try to require a particular JS module which you have created, that particular form and form controller and the JS module that you are trying to do a require are loaded into the memory. So in a way, you are addressing the performance issue which we have discussed with the freeform type of project. So using a reference architecture type of project is considered better when compared to the freeform type of project. How would be the code flow in a reference architecture type of project? For every user interaction on a form, you would call a function that you have implemented in the corresponding form controller associated with that form. So the flow would be, when the user interacts on the form, it would call a function that you have implemented in the corresponding form controller, and from that form controller you can directly interact with the Fabric services, or you can invoke any of the functionality that you have implemented as part of your JS modules, and from the JS modules you can also interact with the Fabric layer. So this is how the control flow would be in a reference architecture type of project. The third type of project which we can create using Visualizer is the reference architecture extensions type of project. We'll use the reference architecture extensions type of project when we want to build an app as a product. For example, let us say we want to build a retail app similar to the Amazon app, Flipkart app, Snapdeal app that we have in the market. So if we have a look at these apps that we have in the market, the functionalities that we have as part of these apps, such as browsing through the list of categories that they have, and then browsing through the list of products that they have, selecting a product, viewing the details of that product, adding that product to the cart, and making a purchase. These would be the common functionalities that we want to build as part of any retail app. All the Snapdeal, Amazon, Flipkart, all these apps have these common functionalities. Similarly, if you want to build a banking app, every banking app would have similar functionalities such as login, checking the list of accounts associated with the logged in user, selecting an account and checking the details of that account, viewing the transactions that have been made on that account, ability to perform transfers, ability to perform payments. All these are the common functionalities that we see in any banking app. So like this, each sector, a retail sector, a banking sector, insurance sector, when you take an apps that are available in that particular sector, those apps will have common functionalities. If we are trying to build an app as a product having all these common functionalities of an app to a particular sector, and then at a later point of time we want to use this pre-built app with all the functionalities, customize it to a particular customer's requirement, and we can release that app as a customized app to a particular customer. To be able to achieve this idea, we have the support of reference architecture extensions type of project inside Visualizer. So if you don't have a vision of building an app as a product, then we can simply use the reference architecture type of project. But if you have a vision of building an app as a product, building all the functionalities that are required for that app to that particular domain, and at a later point of time customizing the app to various customers in that particular domain. So then reference architecture extensions type of project is the appropriate type of project to use. We'll understand how the code is organized in a reference architecture extensions type of project, which enables us to create an app as a product. We look at what are the various components that are present inside the reference architecture extensions type of project, which enable us to achieve building an app as a product and customizing it at a later point of time. In the reference architecture extensions type of project, as you can see here, the first block from the left, which indicates the forms, you can group all the forms related to a particular functionality that you are implementing inside your application. And similar to the reference architecture type of project, in the reference architecture extensions type of project as well, you will have form controllers corresponding to each form that you have inside your application, so that the functionality related to a particular form, you will be implementing that functionality in a particular form controller. The new section that you will see inside a reference architecture extensions type of project consists of presentation controllers, business controllers, and module config. For each functionality that you implement as part of your project, you will create this reference architecture extension group. For example, if you are implementing the authentication functionality and the accounts functionality inside your application, you would have two reference architecture groups, one for the authentication module and second for the accounts module. Similarly, if you are implementing a payments module or a transfers module inside your application, corresponding to each of those modules, you would have a group inside the reference architecture extensions. So the new components as part of this reference architecture extensions are the presentation controllers, business controllers, and the module config. In the reference architecture extensions type of project, similar to the freeform type of project and reference architecture type of project, we'll also have the modules here. So we can have the global modules as well as JS modules defined using require syntax. So the global modules would get loaded in the initial app launch time, whereas the require JS modules would load only when you perform a require on them. In the reference architecture extensions type of project, one more component that you are seeing here is the models. The models component represents the object services that you have defined as part of your Fabric app. So this models component is generated based on the object services that you have defined inside your Fabric layer. And the front end app, when it wants to communicate with the Fabric object services layer, it uses this models layer to communicate with the object services that you have defined as part of your Fabric layer. So in a reference architecture extensions type of project, these reference architecture extensions and the models are the new components that you are seeing, which are not present in either the freeform type of project or the reference architecture type of project. Now that we understand the various components that we have as part of a reference architecture extensions type of project, let us understand how this type of project enables us to create an app as a product so that we can use that app and customize the functionality in that app to various customers at a later point of time. If we have a look at this diagram, for the form controllers, there is a capability provided by the reference architecture extensions type of project to create extensions to the existing form controllers. Similarly, for the presentation controllers, there is a capability provided to create extensions to the existing presentation controllers. In the same way, for the business controllers as well, there is a capability provided to create extensions. So let us say you have created this app with all the functionalities, and then at a later point of time you want to implement this app to a customer by making changes in the functionality as per the customer's requirement. So instead of changing the code in the base form controllers, presentation controllers and business controllers, you would end up creating extensions to the form controllers, presentation controllers and the business controllers, and you would write the customization logic inside these extensions so that you are not changing the base implementation of the app. You are creating extensions and you are implementing all the customizations inside those extensions. In a later episode, we'll talk about what are the responsibilities of each component that we have inside this reference architecture extensions type of project. That is, what kind of activities we can perform as part of form controller, what kind of activities we can perform as part of presentation controllers, and what activities must be performed inside a business controller, so that you can understand how the code is segregated, how the separation of responsibilities is maintained in the reference architecture extensions type of project, so that when you try to customize the functionality of the base app, whenever you are implementing this base app to a particular customer, you can easily find out the code and you can create the extensions for that appropriate component inside this reference architecture extensions type of project. So let's say if you have created a version of this app as a product as version 1. Now let us say a customer has bought your product, the version 1 of this app, and he started customizing the functionality that is part of the version 1 of the product as per his requirements. So the customizations he would implement as part of the extensions to the form controllers, presentation controllers and the business controllers. As the customer is implementing the customizations, you would have added new features into your product and you would have released a version 2 of the product. Now the customer who is implementing the customizations on the version 1 of the product, he wants to consume the version 2 of the product as he wants the new feature that you have introduced as part of the version 2 of the product. He would be able to easily upgrade to the new version of the product without losing the customizations that he has made for implementing the requirements, because all the customizations are made inside the extensions of the various components inside this reference architecture extensions type of project instead of changing the base components. At a later point of time, if there is a second customer who wants to use the product, he would take the version 2 of the product and he would implement the customizations that he wants to achieve. Again, the second customer would also implement the customizations as part of the extensions. So this is how you will be able to build an app as a product using this reference architecture extensions type of project, and various customers can use that app that you have built as a product and start customizing the functionality of the app as per their requirements without changing the base functionality by implementing the customizations as part of extensions and keeping the upgrade path alive so that they can upgrade the customized app to the new versions of the base app that you release without having to put a lot of effort. So this is how the reference architecture extensions type of project enables us to build an app as a product and reduce the effort to build the app from scratch and reduce the time to market. So these are the various types of projects that you can create inside Visualizer. Freeform type of project, reference architecture type of project, and reference architecture extensions type of project. We'll learn more about reference architecture extensions type of project in the upcoming videos. Thank you.